This is a story about my beloved Danila and his quest to become the most talented gem carver in all of the Ural Mountains. His master, Prokopiych, was a famous craftsman that lived in the Ural Mountains. At the time, Danila was an orphan living in the village. He was weak and couldn't work at the factory, but he was full of dreams and liked to observe nature. He once tried to help an old herdsman while playing his flute, but the old shepherd fell asleep and several cattle were eaten by wolves. Danila and the herdsman were severely punished. A kind old woman took Danila into her house and treated him using many herbs and flowers and taught him the lore of the plants. She told him about the stone flower on Malachite Mountain and said, "Whoever finds that flower will never be happy." After he recovered, Danila was sent to Prokopiych to study gem carving. One day, an owner of the factory sent him a commission to make a vase from malachite along with the sketch he wanted. And as Danila began the intricate task, he was repeatedly unsatisfied with the idea of the sketch. After spending days creating the vase, he showed it to other craftsmen who liked and praised it, but Danila said, "The vase is made exactly according to the sketch, but there's no living beauty in it." One very old craftsman warned him to not think that way, otherwise he could become a servant to the mistress of Copper Mountain. Her workers lived in the mountain, and nobody ever sees them. Once he was lucky enough to see their work, which was magnificent, but told Danila that their work couldn't compare with theirs because they've seen the stone flower and understood the beauty of the stone. After the conversation with the other craftsman, Danila went into the woods to look for more stone. Prokopiych was worried about him and told him to marry me, to whom he was engaged, but Danila said he needed to wait. One day while in the woods, he heard a whisper calling, "Danila, look for the stone on Serpent Hill." He thought perhaps it was the mistress of Copper Mountain, so he went to the Serpent Hill and found the huge block of malachite that Whisper told him about. He was pleased and took the stone home to start carving the vase, but he was soon again disappointed by the result, so he and I instead announced the date of our wedding. The day before the wedding, he went for a walk on the hill again, sat down and thought about the flower. All of a sudden, the mistress of Copper Mountain appeared before his eyes. She replied that she could show it to him, but afterwards he would regret it. Danila understood the consequences, but said that he must see it. She obliged and showed him the wonderful flower. And in the evening when Danila came back to the village for our pre-wedding party, he had fun at first, but became sadder and sadder as the night went on. To my questioning, he replied that he had a headache, and after the party, he returned home, broke his vase, and ran away. After he left, the village was full of rumors, and no one had known where he had ran off to. 3 years had passed, and I never married. After my parents died, I came to live with Prokopiych, but after helping him with his craft for a while, he soon passed as well. I didn't have any money, so I decided to make some brooches and traveled to Serpent Hill to hope of finding some good stone. Suddenly, I saw a beautiful piece of malachite. I took it home and tried to carve several brooches, and after I carved some beautiful ones, I was happy and sold my merchant works in the village. I ran again to Serpent Hill to look for another good stone. When I looked around, it seemed to me that I was standing in an unfamiliar part of the woods, and the mountain opened before me. When I looked down, I saw a man who looked just like him, and he raised his hands toward me. I wanted to jump down to him, but my vision disappeared. The next day I ran to the hill hoping to see him again, and when I found myself in the magical woods, I called out to him, and suddenly the mistress of the Copper Mountain appeared and demanded why I came to her garden, and if I need the stones, take what I would wish and go away. But I replied that I don't need her dead stones. I needed my Danila back. The mistress laughed and said, "Do you have any idea to whom you are speaking?" And I cried out that I am not blind. I knew who she was and that I wasn't afraid of her. Not at all. The mistress sighed and said, "All right, let him speak then." It was at that same moment I saw him, and the mistress said, "You have to choose. If you go with her, you will forget everything you saw and learned in the mountain. And if you want to stay here, you have to forget the rest of the world." He sighed and said, "I am sorry, but I cannot forget the people I love." The mistress smiled and said, "All right, go back home. And for your honesty and loyalty, I will give you a present. You will not lose your knowledge that you've learned here, but do not tell people of the mountain." And when we returned, we lived happily together for years.